Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting is now resumed and is in public session. Before we begin, can I remind members and those in public gallery to please turn off their mobile phones as they interfere with the recording equipment. Sorry, better make sure mine is going off as well here. Before we begin, I just need to turn to some other matters, some housekeeping matters. So, right, by virtue of sections, I have to read this to you. By virtue of section 1721 of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to this committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against either a person outside the Houses or an official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I would now like to welcome our first session of our meeting today with the following representatives. From the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, Mr Dominic Mullaney, Mr Cormac McNally. From Meath County Council, Mr Des Foley, Director of Services. And can I just acknowledge to Des that I worked with you for many years when you were Town Clerk in Drogheda, and we miss you greatly. And I'm sorry you're in County Meath, but on this occasion I think it's useful. And Mr Nicholas White, a Senior Engineer. And from Junistown and District Community Association, Niamh Banny Leinshig and Brendan Logue. You're all very welcome, and I will now invite them in the order in which has been presented to me here. I'll now invite Dominic Mullaney from the Roads Division of the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport to make his opening statement, please, followed by Meath County Council and then Junistown and District Community Association.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to attend here today also. Regarding Julianstown Bypass, under the provisions of the relevant roads and road traffic legislation, the maintenance and improvement of regional and local roads, together with traffic management measures, is of course a statutory responsibility of each local council. The Department is responsible for overall road policy, technical guidance, and within the budget available to it, for the provision of grant funding to assist local authorities with their road programmes. As a result of cutbacks in funding for roads during the recession, grant funding for road improvement projects under the Pacific Improvement and Strategic Regional and Local Road Grant Schemes had to be curtailed after 2013. This was necessary because expenditure on maintenance and renewal was falling well short of what was required to maintain the regional and local road network adequately. Under Project Ireland 2040, there have been increases in grant funding for the regional and local road programme, particularly in 2018 and 2019. This has allowed the Department to provide local authorities with additional grant support for maintenance and renewal of the network. However, in order to avoid deterioration in the existing condition of the regional and local road network, 4,700 kilometres of regional and local road pavement needs to be maintained, and another 4,700 kilometres needs to be strengthened each year. This target has not been met at present, and in the current year, the maintenance target is 2,400 kilometres and rehabilitation target is 2,150 kilometres. Overall, it is estimated on a conservative basis that expenditure of 630 million is needed per annum to keep the regional and local road network in a steady state condition. For this reason, the main focus of grant expenditure continues to be on the maintenance of the network. Project Ireland does make provision for the implementation of 12 regional and local road improvements projects, subject to necessary approvals, in the period to 2023. Outside of that, some limited provision is being made in the capital budget for the appraisal of a pipeline of upgrade projects. This is intended to cover the appraisal of projects for development, if possible, in the later years of the NDP. The scope for carrying out pipeline projects through to the development stage is dependent, of course, on the availability of funding. If a local authority wishes to put forward a future project for consideration, it must comply with the requirements of the Public Spending Code and the Department's own capital appraisal guidelines. The Department has issued detailed guidance to local authorities in April 2018, setting out the project appraisal requirements. And under this appraisal process, the preliminary appraisal has to be submitted in relation to each proposed project. Projects costing over €5 million also need a detailed appraisal report if they progress beyond the preliminary stage. At preliminary appraisal, the local authority application needs to demonstrate sufficient analysis to underpin the assessment of the merits or otherwise of the scheme. Local authorities are required to outline what consideration has been given to investment options, including different transport modes and traffic management options. The preliminary appraisal also encompasses a preliminary multi-criteria analysis, which is used for comparing options. Meath County Council has prepared a draft preliminary business case in relation to a bypass of Julianstown, and further liaison is required with the Council with a view to finalising that submission. Thank you.
Okay, that's your submission.
Yeah.
Is that your full submission?
Thank you.
It is, right, okay. Well, I'll comment on that later, but I'll ask Meath County Council, Mr Foley, if he wishes, and then Mr Wyatt, if you wish to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee. Meath County Council welcomes the opportunity to appear before the committee today to discuss the traffic issues in Julianstown. Our vision for Julianstown, as set out in our county development plan, is to consolidate and strengthen the village through the provision of a well-defined village centre area and to support a range of land uses that will benefit the residential population. The Council is committed to playing its part to improve the quality of the built and natural environment of the village, while catering for the needs of the local community and ensuring that the village develops in a sustainable manner. In terms of traffic, on an average day, more than 20,000 vehicles pass through the village on the Regional Road 132. This is despite the opening of the Drogheda bypass section of the M1 motorway in 2003. The high traffic volumes create a situation which is incompatible with the Council's long-term vision for Julianstown and which is likely to worsen as Drogheda and East Meath develop further. We therefore believe that the provision of a traffic solution for the village is central to realising the aspirations for Julianstown. The Council raised the matter of the traffic situation in Julianstown directly with the Minister of Transport at a meeting in January 2017. Subsequently, in March 2017, the Director of Services for Transportation communicated with both the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, DTAS, and Transport Infrastructure Ireland, TII, requesting them to engage in discussions about advancing a solution to the transport situation. In December 2018, the Council also submitted a draft preliminary business case to DTAS, which concluded that there is a prima facie case for doing something to address the traffic volumes in Julianstown. Furthermore, the initial analysis showed that a bypass of Julianstown emerged as the preferred option in both the multi-criteria analysis and preliminary cost-benefit analysis that were undertaken. The committee will appreciate that it is beyond the resources of Meath County Council to deliver the scale of intervention that is potentially required in Julianstown without capital grant support from central government. If this is forthcoming, the Council would prioritise the process to identify and progress the optimum solution. In the meantime, the Council has made provision of €800,000 in its capital investment programme 2019 to 2021 for traffic management measures for the village. Environmental studies are currently being undertaken in relation to the proposed interim traffic management measures in preparation for an application to Bord Pleanála for approval. Thank you.
To make a contribution at this stage.
Sorry, I've nothing to add to the opening statement now, but just we're available to answer the committee's questions in relation
sure, of course,
to
Okay, I now call on Niamh Banny Leinshig and Brendan Logue to make their contribution. Niamh, Tom.
Okay.
Orlor Agat.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you very much for inviting representatives of Julianstown and District Community Association to attend here today to give evidence about the heavy traffic and its effect on the village of Julianstown in County Meath. Julianstown is a village of 600 people situated on the R132 between Drogheda and Junction 7 of the M1 motorway. It's on the attached map. The R132 used to be the old N1 Dublin-Belfast Road. In 2003, the M1 motorway opened, taking through traffic around Drogheda. However, traffic volumes remain high and continue to be grossly excessive for a small village. While it might have been expected to alleviate traffic congestion in Julianstown, the M1 has had little effect since A, it remains the primary access route to Drogheda South and East Meath, and B, the area has seen a very high rise in population growth in the last decade, with more planned. In fact, even today, there is enough land zoned in the southern environments of Drogheda to accommodate a population of more than 18,000, which is just short of the size of Sligo town. While there have been some suggestions that heavy traffic is caused by toll avoidance, this has not been borne out by technical studies on the traffic in the area. According to a briefing prepared by the NRA in 2016, see Annex 1, it has always been recognised by the authority and borne out in traffic studies undertaken that the old N1, existing R132 route, would continue to attract significant traffic volumes due to commercial and residential traffic movements in and around Drogheda town, the movements to and from Drogheda, and the movements to and from Drogheda Port. The decision of the NRA board to adopt the toll scheme noted that the existing R132 would continue to operate as a toll-free public road. A study carried out by the authority in 2012 demonstrated that this toll strategy had been effective, as the overall volume of toll avoidance rates on the M1 is effectively low at less than 3% through the length of the scheme. So today, we are seeing an average annual daily traffic, as measured by the TII itself, in excess of 20,000, with weekly levels exceeding 22,000. According to TII's Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, a Type 2 dual carriageway is recommended to carry this level of traffic and not a village street. Based on the analysis of the TII's network on traffic counters, Julianstown is the 16th busiest road in the country. There are 86 roads in total, including all motorways and national roads, and it's busier than the M6, M8, M9, M17 and M18, and all of the national roads apart from the N1, N6, N7, N8, N18 and N40. Just as well there aren't more than 86. Under EU law, traffic noise in the village has been modelled to be 15 to 20 decibels in excess of the World Health Organization thresholds for human health. It is suspected that there is significant air pollution coming from the traffic, in particular NO2, nitrogen dioxide. And if you breathe in oxygen dioxide for more than 10 minutes, you're dead. In a letter sent from Meath County Council to the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport on the 14th of March, Mr Des Foley, Director of Services for Meath County Council, noted that the expected volume of traffic has grown significantly faster than was anticipated when the M1 was approved. He noted that the future growth of Drogheda and Laytown Bettystown areas will further increase the pressure on the roads which pass through the village, and that the Council now believes it is imperative that work begins to find a solution to significantly ease traffic levels to a level that befits a village street. He forwarded a 2015 study by ACOM which shows that a local bypass of Julianstown is the most effective solution compared to a proposed distributor road in Bryanstown and a new link to the M1. Most recently, in December 2018, Meath County Council submitted a draft preliminary appraisal for a Julianstown bypass to the DTTAS, which looked at cost-benefit analysis of various proposed solutions. This document again recognises high journey times due to congestion, unsafe conditions for all road users, particularly pedestrians and cyclists. In Julianstown, we have about a mile between our two pedestrian crossings. So if you're trying to cross the road in the morning time, it's just like playing a gauntlet. Unhealthy environment due to air pollution, vibration and noise, lack of resilience of the transport network in North East Meath given increased future demands, and concludes that a Julianstown bypass is the preferred option based on a multi-criteria and cost-benefit analysis. In fact, the benefit to cost ratio based on reduction of congestion alone is 4:1, with an 80 million saving achieved. While the JDCA acknowledges that public transport has a role to play in transport policy overall, Julianstown is a special case because the health and safety of residents is of paramount concern. No public transport can solve the problems in Julianstown because a major portion of traffic travelling to Drogheda and Eastmeath passes through the village, including HGV traffic to the port. It is clear that the R132 should be designated as a national route in light of the traffic volume and the fact that it remains a strategic access route to Drogheda and Laytown and Bettystown, with a population in the region of 50,000. The upgrading to a national road can be done under Section 10 of the Roads Act 1993 by ministerial order, a purely administrative act. JDCA therefore asks as follows: upgrade the R132 to a national road. Minister for Transport to put Julianstown on a capital plan and expedite it. Meath County Council to adopt meaningful policies of the new county development plan to A, monitor traffic levels and the environment in Julianstown, and B, rapidly advance plans for the Julianstown bypass, for example, corridor selection to avoid granting planning permissions, etc. Last page. Julianstown residents hope that the public authorities, both at a local and national level, meet their responsibilities to accommodate the population of Drogheda and Eastmeath with appropriate infrastructure. At the moment, Julianstown is being crushed by extreme traffic. We are now fully committed to driving a solution, and if this means litigation, then we are more than prepared to go down that path. We are very confident that the way things have been done to date represent breaches of EU environmental law and of our fundamental right to a healthy environment. We are certain that if the administrative authorities fail to take action, they will be forced to do so by the courts. And thank you very much for the opportunity to put this evidence before the committee, and we look forward to answering the committee's questions.
Sure. Mr. Logue, do you wish to add to that address?
Yes, I do, please. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just look at some of the human consequences of the existing chaos in Julianstown. As my colleague Niamh has said, this is the 16th busiest road in the country, busier than many of the main arteries, the motorways and so on. However, Julianstown is not like these arteries, even the M50, in that it is a blocked artery. And it is a blocked artery that will cause a heart attack to a lot of people, including the political system. Mr. Foley has said 2 years ago that it is now imperative that work begins to find a solution to significantly ease traffic volumes to the level that befits a village street, as my colleague Niamh just said. Roads you know, in the East Meath area generally are the same now as they were 200 years ago, apart from the Daly Road, which was realigned some years back. But that's not a big issue as far as East Meath is concerned. We're back to the era of the horse and cart. Anyone who has attempted to go through Julianstown into Laytown and pass through a road that is not wide enough to accommodate 2 cars in some cases, that is the bridge under the railway line, or other very narrow places like at the Church of Ireland. And, you know, these would hardly be adequate for horse and cart, let alone a traffic volume that is now coming from an estimated population in the East Meath and South Drogheda area of 40,000, which is planned to increase to 65,000 if you take in the zoned land which exists in the area. Another thing that's of interest, I think, here is that the traffic count is increasing by 2% per annum. And that, when you do your compound calculations, is much greater than you would otherwise think. Also, the count of the traffic in Julianstown, as far as we know, does not take into account traffic coming from the R150, that's the Daly Road, heading to and from Drogheda. The counter is at the school at Whitecross, apparently. Now, another thing that's happening is that there's a new supermarket to be built by Aldi, or is now in the course of construction, and which will open shortly. This will bring much greater traffic from the hinterland through Julianstown, across the R150 Laytown Road, over to Aldi. Now, just picture yourself as a driver. You're driving to work, you're a commuter, you're from South Drogheda or you're from East Meath. You're sitting in a traffic jam, which is probably in the region of 1.2 to 2 kilometres back up the road towards Drogheda. It's creeping along. It may not even be creeping along. It may be stopped. Picture yourself in that situation. Perhaps you're under pressure to get to an appointment. Perhaps you're utterly frustrated with the way things are happening. In the evening time, it's even worse, in the sense that traffic becomes backed up on the R132 back as far as the Gormanston interchange. And it even is backed up onto the slip road onto the M1, and this represents a safety hazard. So, you know, the human cost of this is enormous. It's not just the financial cost, as my colleague Niamh has indicated. There's a human cost to this, and there's a very significant human cost. Now, Niamh also mentioned the pedestrian risks. Now, pedestrian risks, if you are a resident of the village of Julianstown and you wish to cross the R132 from its centre, for example, there is no safe place to cross between the Whitecross School and the village community garden, a distance of 1.2 kilometres. Now, if you want to cross, you've got to watch the traffic for an opportunity where there's a gap and dash across. And as you can imagine, that option is not available to elderly people. There are 2 aspects to the problem as well that are not really dealt with in any of the material that we have seen. First of all, there's the traffic jams in the morning and the traffic jams in the evening. But in between, that is at the non-commuting times and at night, there is a very, very fast-moving traffic which, you know, is probably averaging 70 kilometres per hour in a 50-kilometre zone. And some of this stuff, you know, incorporates heavy vehicles, HGVs carrying petrol and gas, and, you know, an accident. I leave the rest to the committee's imagination. We feel that we can't see much progress happening at the moment. And we feel that eventually this blocked artery will result in a political issue. So again, as Niamh said, air monitoring is a major issue. We have installed at our own cost an air monitoring device. If it indicates that the the air pollution exceeds EU levels, we, or local residents, will take legal action against the County Council and the Department, should that be necessary. So thank you very much, committee members and Chairman.
So before I open up, I just want to talk to the Department just in terms of facts. In your submission, I think you were invited to talk about the Julianstown bypass. That's what this issue is about, and you would have been notified about that. And in the opening statement which you gave us, you mentioned Julianstown twice. That's once in the headline and then in the last line, basically. And I'm unhappy, not with you personally, and this is not a personal criticism. It's the department response to come into an Oireachtas committee to talk about the 16th busiest road in Ireland. In Ireland, the whole country is totally and woefully inadequate. And it refers nowhere to the fact that, you know, to the North-South Economic Corridor, to the development of Drogheda, the huge developments in East Meath, the traffic counts. All of those issues are absent from your contribution. And I just want to note that with regret. And I feel that if we can do something today to inform the department of where the real issues are for your department, because this will be your decision as a department, having done due and proper analysis of the facts and the figures, that it will be placed on the National Primary Road list. The traffic, as I understand it, and maybe the County Council can assist me in this to some extent, is that I think it's around an average about 20,000 cars per day. That's the equivalent of the traffic that's using, say, the Port Tunnel every day in and out of that village. But it's more than that, because you have thousands of new homes on their way, both in East Meath and in North Drogheda. So it's as if you have the city of Waterford, a population in excess of 60, 70, 80,000 people there by 10 years' time, all funneling through this road which was built 200 years ago and is totally unacceptable. So the importance of this nationally is for the department to recognise the pressure that development is putting on places like Julianstown, but also on the commuters who are delayed. I'm delayed on average maybe half an hour a day going through Julianstown, and the cost of that to me and other drivers as a commuter. And the question, obviously, in the report which the Council have done, which needs further examination, is the question of public transport alternatives to using the motorway. Now, I welcome, obviously, the DART development, which is hugely important, and the huge significant increase in capacity, but that's only part of the solution. So I would ask, maybe I'll take my colleagues in now, but I would ask you to perhaps maybe Meath County Council might address that issue in terms of the 4 options that you looked at for the future. You know, the weakness in your case, and I don't say it's a personal weakness, it's just that you need to look further. The public transport options need to be examined further, and I want the department, you know, to consider, you know, how they ought to respond now. And can I point out to the department that, as chairman, I looked for a briefing note, and I got it 2 months ago from the department, and it's far more comprehensive with respect than your opening statement here today. So I just think whoever was talking to you, they didn't tell you, you know, they didn't tell you anything about the story of Julianstown. You iterated none of the problems or the issues. And I say that I'm talking to the department and that. Now, I'll take, if I may, I know Deputy O'Keefe, he might want to give way to them, but can I welcome Councillor Paddy Mead and Councillor Annie Hoy as well, who are local councillors who are very concerned about this issue. And they're local councillors and they're very welcome here, and hopefully it will inform your council debate as well. Sorry, Deputy Bannock and then Deputy Munster.
Thank you, Chairman. Just firstly to thank you for giving me the opportunity to attend here today. I'm not a member of the Transport Committee, but indeed the constituency of Louth, as we all know, stretches from Omeath to Julianstown, and I'd like to particularly welcome, obviously, Des, who you alluded to, who we soldiered in Louth County Council and Drogheda for a long period of time, but equally to welcome the department and indeed the Residents Association. I want to commend you in terms of the difficulties that you're experiencing there in terms of the presentation, firstly, of Julianstown. I have to say, we look at how villages are presented, and I certainly wouldn't blame you for not wanting to present your village because of the issue of traffic, but every time I go through it I find huge improvement in terms of the efforts of Daly Towns and the association. Look, I'm not going to be repetitive, but I think it's important to stress the area of Drogheda South and Bettystown, Laytown, Julianstown has exploded exponentially from I was a young fella who went on summer holidays to Bettystown, and indeed to try and find your way around it is exacerbating, to say the least, from what it was many years ago. And we can blame planning, we can blame all sorts of issues around the growth of transport, but the reality is that the border corridor, as it's often been described, its location equidistant between Dublin and Belfast, has created that huge growth in the area. And I'm here today to support your view that, first of all, that the word I think used was that the village has been crushed with traffic, and obviously to testify to that as a public representative. The congestion that I experienced in Daly, whether you're coming on the motorway or having to traverse, as the Chair has said, the traffic flows, there is a safety issue, not just in relation to the village. There's going to be, with a growth of 2% of traffic, there is going to be a problem on the motorway very, very shortly in terms of what has been alluded to, unless the department sits up and takes note. We can talk about the congestion, the pollution, the health and safety, all of which are a huge issue. And I certainly wouldn't like to see illegal it arriving in the courts in relation to this. I do believe that the issue of designating it a national route and the provision of a bypass needs to be ramped up. We all know that the road network is the lifeline for all communities, but no community should suffer to the degree that Julianstown is. And I believe that it needs to be prioritised and put on a footing that it is expedited over the next number of years. And I want to commend you for your presentation and to say that whatever efforts, I think us as members of the Oireachtas, particularly from the constituency of Louth and East Meath, will try and impress upon the Department and indeed the Minister the need to prioritise this route. And I'm delighted that you have come here today to highlight the fact that it is one of the busiest networks in the country. I think Meath County Council has been doing its best within its resources, but it needs that help from the department to prioritise this project and to alleviate that congestion. And I started by saying it's an economic corridor. The reality is that the people at the centre of that economic corridor are the people that are living almost equidistant from Dublin and Dundalk, but equally in the centre of the Dublin-Belfast developments. And it is a great place to live. And I think the frustration that's been experienced, the people who use it as a suburb for their work, be it to Dublin, particularly to Dublin or to Belfast, need to be supported, and particularly in getting in and out of Dublin on a day-and daily basis. I just want to equally support what was said earlier by Mr. Logue in relation to the one road, I think it's R150 into Laytown. I mean, there's portions of that road that how people can pass on it is beyond me, and there definitely needs to be something done in relation to the bridge, the railway bridge in Laytown, before there's not a serious accident. I'm sure there have been accidents, but and I just want to commend the presentation, and I hopefully that it will highlight that this road needs to be ramped up in terms of its priority in terms of our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Munster.
Firstly, I wanted to say to the department, I want you just to picture the scenario. I mean, you have a small picturesque village with a population of 600. And every single day, 7 days a week, there's in excess of 20,000 vehicles, including HGVs, thundering through the village constantly. You'd actually have to see it to believe it. Trying to cross the road, if you're standing in the middle of the village in Julianstown, is the equivalent of taking your life in your hands. It's like trying to cross an extremely busy dual carriageway. It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. Now, Meath County Council have submitted the business case, and in your response here today, you said at preliminary appraisal, the local authority application needs to demonstrate sufficient analysis to underpin an assessment of the merits or otherwise of the scheme. Now, you have examined, you've had the business case which was submitted last December. Based on that business case, do you believe that they have demonstrated exactly what you call for in a preliminary appraisal? Have they demonstrated the merits of a bypass, the need for a bypass? Yeah.
Deputy, yes, we've had the appraisal. There's one aspect in particular on the appraisal that we're seeking more information, and that relates to the public transport analysis. You know, we feel that maybe an O&D survey, origin and destination survey, is required to identify where people are coming from and where they're going to. And the reason I say that is that before we rule out a public transport option, and I'm not saying what's the correct option at this stage, before we rule out a public transport option, we need to see, you know, what are the possibilities for people being able to use buses or trains. And just to mention, you know, it takes 8 to 13 years to bring a road from start to finish. And, you know, that's TII's estimate. And even if we were talking in a case like this, that it could take 8 to 10 years, that's a long time. And by that time, the NDP will hopefully have delivered major public transport improvements on the rail corridor to Drogheda and to Dundalk. So, you know, that's the analysis that needs to be done before we decide that the road option is the appropriate one. And that's what's...
The other analysis you need to do is to look at the planning policy in both Louth County Council and Meath County Council, the permissions that are extant, the land that has been zoned. And I think that one of the points, sure, is that a lot of people using East Meath are actually from East Meath. You know, so it's actually as a result of significant developments there that the congestion continues. Sorry.
The zoning for residential alone in South Louth and East Meath over the next number of years is enormous. So that's going to compound the problem even further. But just when you talk about the public transport option, I mean, you have Drogheda stations at capacity. Laytown, literally, you know, you can barely get on some mornings. Am I right in saying that the DART expansion to Drogheda, it could be 2027 before that's delivered?
Yes, you are. The commitment is there that it will be delivered by the end of 2027. But
so, whilst you say examine, and I accept, you know, that of course you need to take on board public transport options. But there's nothing in particular, or would have been done by now, I presume, by the government and the minister. There's no realistic plans in the here and now future to alleviate, in relation to public transport, to alleviate the daily congestion through Julianstown.
Well,
or you'd have been able to tell us about them. They're all long-term plans, are they not?
They're a few years away.
Yeah.
There is an intention to increase the number of rail cars on the line, and
but that's just to deal with capacity.
500 are being ordered, as I understand it, this year, and the 2027 is not the year. I think it's much earlier than that.
Certainly, yes.
I think just to be helpful,
yeah.
As I understand it, the DART will be in Drogheda once these carriages are actually constructed. The order has gone out, the tender has gone out, so it'll be much quicker than 2027 because they don't have to wait for the electrification of the line. Maybe we could ask our clerk if it's in order to write to the National Transport Authority to get clarity on that. So before electrification, you will have the dart and Drogheda, and each dart will be capable of carrying upwards of 1,000 passengers. So it is an important analysis that has to be done, certainly.
May I say, Chairman?
Sure, Fred. Sorry.
With regard to the question of public transport, Meath County Council's preliminary appraisal of this matter has concluded that public transport will not achieve the Council's own traffic objectives, and that a 4-to-1 cost-benefit analysis for the bypass to village. If the department is backing a public transport, they need to demonstrate to us what are these plans. Are there any specifics involved, or is it just a wishful thinking situation?
That's my point, that there's no foreseeable public transport options being put forward, or you would have been able to. I'm sure you'd have been happy to give us that information over the next number of years. It's all, you know, long term. We haven't had confirmation of a date for the expansion of the Dart to Drogheda, but there is talk that it could be 27.
I actually have that.
What
I
year?
don't have it with me today.
Is it definitive in the year that it will be delivered?
No, the actual carriages are being ordered.
We know the carriages are being ordered right across the state. Yeah, no, but my question is...
Just make the point. Once the carriages are ordered, they're delivered, and Drogheda is on the first delivery line. And that won't be 2027, it'll be before that.
But you still have the problems of, and again, we've no... You know, the date has not been confirmed, so it could be hopefully sooner rather than later. We all hope that, but there's no evidence to show that it will actually alleviate the serious congestion in Julianstown. There's no evidence whatsoever, and there's no public transport, short-term public transport options being put forward or plans that would alleviate the residents in the village, you know, their concerns. Would you agree that the road as it currently stands is not fit for purpose because of the volume of traffic?
I wouldn't argue with that, yeah. No.
Say that,
so I'm saying, you know, part of what the residents in Julianstown are looking for is they had marked down that the first step was to upgrade the R132 to a national road. Yeah. Given the business case submitted by Meath County Council and the Director of Services there, would you propose that the road be upgraded to a national road, given all of what's...
The only thing I'd say about that is it wouldn't get around the problem that two things need to happen. Firstly, the analysis has to be done. So even if it were a national road, TII would still have to do the analysis and the money would still have to be found. So regardless of whether it's a regional road or a national road, those two hurdles still have to be overcome.
Just on a point there, TII have informed me that it is a matter for the department to recommend to TII, and they will accept whatever the department recommends. It's not TII who make that recommendation, it's yourselves.
That's correct.
That's what I've been told.
That's correct, yeah.
So therefore what you said is not correct then. That it's not the TII that will do it, it is you.
Oh no, what I'm saying is the classification function rests with the Minister.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's within the department.
Yeah.
Now, no, what I was saying was that even if the Minister did an order and made it a national road, TII would still have to go through the same process of undertaking the analysis and the justification in conjunction with the local authority, and they would still have to find the money for it. So they're the two issues that have to be addressed.
Would that be a first step?
Well,
it certainly wouldn't harm any.
It would be helpful if you considered that.
Business case.
If you considered that TII might be in a better position to deliver it more quickly, but they still would be. They still have to wrestle with the same timelines. It does take time to get projects up and running, and they'd still have to find the money. As of
Given
now,
that the TII analysis.
If the Minister puts it on his priority list, then it's de facto on the TII list. So if it's not on it, it'll never be done. So we've got to get it on that. And I think, sorry, Declan, I'll just bring in a second. Just to one question I need to know the answer to. How quick, I accept that you must look at all options, and option 4 has been identified as needs more work done on it. So we have all the facts. How quickly could that be done? I mean, how quickly can that survey be done?
I suppose Meath County Council might be in a better position to answer that, and they'd probably engage a specialist to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. My guess is 6 to 9 months, but I'm open to correction.
Sure, could you comment on that?
Well, I suppose it depends on the extent of the origin and destination survey. Now, there's a time to procure it, and I know lots of people come before you and say procurement is an issue, and that's the same for us. So there is a time to do that. Typically that takes about 2 months for us to procure someone to do it. The way you may be able to get there are some companies now that have information available that we can tap into. It's expensive information, but Google and Bluetooth have information about which may be an opportunity for us to use it. So maybe 6 months, yes, 9 months. I generally underestimate the time with this optimism bias that I have, but I'd say six months it could be done in.
So if we were to say, so the process, you would need the funding for that. What would you have that funding, or how do you get the funding for it? Or can you do it now?
Well, I suppose what we are hoping to do, and we're hoping to start a process where we tap into a capital fund that lasts for the lifetime of the project. Right. And that's really that's the kind of certainty that we are looking for at this stage. And just, I suppose, just to agree with Dominic, just in terms of the process, the department and the TII are bound by the same process as the Public Spending Code and the Capital Appraisal Framework. So in terms of accelerating the scheme, I don't think there's an advantage to be gained by going to the TI to accelerate a scheme if it is to be a bypass. And I suppose we have to be careful about jumping to that as the conclusion, because there is a process to go through. And I think it's important to know, just listening to the conversation, that a project appraisal this isn't the beginning and end of all the project appraisal that will be done in the scheme. It's an iterative process that will get progressively more detailed as we go through the scheme.
If the department are giving us this today, and if in 6 months' time we have much more data and they have much more data, it puts the case, and I agree it has to be incremental, it has to be strategic, it must be equitable in every way, but if we don't start that process, we never get there.
Yeah.
So I think that's the point. I accept that this isn't the end of it, but it is the beginning of moving it from where it is stuck at the moment.
Yeah.
Sorry, Deputy Randall.
Chair, the issue of prioritising it, the phrase I think used by Mr. Wyatt was accelerate, and I think a combination of acceleration and prioritising the project, and if we could get a commitment to create a roadmap and a timescale. Exactly. And I would, if an order as a non-member, I would propose that the committee should request that as of today, and that at least the residents would see an outcome that's set to a timescale rather than living horse and getting grass.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's reasonable. So in other words, if the due process on that, if the council and the department would agree subsequent to our meeting today to proceed with that, to communicate with us after when you've discussed that, and that would commence the issue. There's another point I want to raise, is that part of the problem with the massive construction, it's almost a builder's paradise, but it's heading for a concrete jungle, I think, in East Meath now at this stage, and that the quality of life is seriously and adversely impacted by the lack of proper public transport, although there has been significant improvements recently, I know, in terms of bus earn. But, the question of green space, are you going to build in every green field? Or do you have is there going to be, a zone where you will not have untrammeled and unfettered development by builders and speculators? What is the future for East Meath?
I think I can deal with that, Chair. And maybe on your first point to say that, yes, we will get into further discussion with the department on the draft pre-appraisal report, and we can follow through on aspects of the report as mentioned, for example, the origin and destination survey that needs to be done, the public transport elements of the report that need to be further analysed. We can certainly do that, and I think we will get into early discussions following this meeting with our colleagues in the department on that to try and finalise elements of the report. In terms of the further development of Drogheda and East Meath, I suppose it might be helpful. The Meath County Council are currently going through and have started the process of the County Development Plan, a review of the County Development Plan for the next 6 years. And the councillors present would be getting briefings on this currently. The population projections that we have, well, for Drogheda, because Drogheda is recognised, as you know, as a regional growth centre in the National Planning Framework. Our current population figures for Drogheda indicates a population of 41,000 people. It's set to grow to 50,000 people by 2031. East Meath, on the other hand, the current population is 11,800, almost 12,000 people. What the County Development Plan is setting out is a policy of consolidation in East Meath. So by 2026, the lifetime of this new County Development Plan, the population projection for East Meath is 13,300. So there will be some growth, but it's more the emphasis will be on consolidation of that growth. So that might help to answer. Maybe. So
that means that it won't be a speculator's paradise.
No,
what I'm talking about is, will there be green belts? Is there a green belt proposed? Recreation, amenity?
Certainly, that's all.
I mean, that's the key. That's the key, because people are fed up of the long commute day. The facts are that commuters in East Meath have the longest commute in the country, according to the CSO. I think the average commute is an hour and a half per day for commuters in East Meath. There's nobody else in the country has a longer commute, and I appreciate you may not be aware of that point. But I just think there's huge issues here between Drogheda in County Louth and East Meath, and that we need a new focus on the overall development of both communities. And I think the closer alignment between the councils is what is proposed in legislation which is coming.
Yes.
But we need joined up thinking, and we need incisive, decisive actions. And we need the Department of all. I know I go back to the point of today. We need the Department of Transport, and I appreciate you listening to us here. And I understand, where you are theoretically, but factually, we need to really put a bomb under the Department of Transport in terms of this issue, because East Meath and Drogheda is a time bomb that is developing without structures, without infrastructure adequately, certainly in the case of Julianstown at the moment. So I don't know if anybody will I close on that? Sorry, yeah.
Welcome what Des Foley has said in relation to that Meath County Council will accelerate the process in relation to the public transport analysis and everything that we need to bring it up a notch, if you like, for the preliminary appraisal rather. At that stage, if that could be done in the next 12 months, is it your opinion that government would give approval for the funding to include this if everything's tightened up and good to go? Is it your opinion that government will give approval for the funding for the go-ahead for the bypass in Julianstown?
That's not one I could answer here today.
That's the worry, you see. You see, that's the worry.
I really couldn't. I'm sorry, but
That's the concern.
The business case will be made anyway. And the political
Well, you
case
can make
will
a
be
business case, but I mean, it's.
I think it will represent a step further, and it's an incremental you can't get to the end point without going through that step. So that's as much as I
can
can
we
say.
leave it this way then before we finish? Is that will you communicate? Maybe I don't know who would be the department accountable here. Would you communicate to us following your discussions with Meath County Council as to the outcome of your discussion in relation to the further analysis that has to be done?
Could we be informed of the
Of course, yeah. No,
change of correspondence in this?
Yep, of course. Yep, if the department are happy with that,
We can update you as soon as
you
certain points have been reached.
of course, yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Without us going through FOI, which we have
No, we
continuously had to do.
won't. I'm doing FOIs myself last night on TII, so there's a lack of transparency in lots of places. But I must say, look, come here, we've had a good outcome today. We had an excellent debate. And I would like to thank everybody who came here. The Joint Committee is now suspended until 12 p.m. and we have other people coming in then. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Here we are. Now. We just have to wait for the TV behind you. It shows when, so this actually goes out live. There you are. So, So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting is now resumed and is in public session. Can I remind members, witnesses and those in public gallery to please turn off your mobile phones completely as they may interfere with the actual recording. And that's just what I'm doing now. And before we welcome our distinguished visitors and our guests today at the request of Pádraig Ó Céidigh, I just want to address one issue that arose following our last meeting in relation to the bypass of RD, which Transport Infrastructure Ireland have decided to take off the list or to review, or as they say, to pause. Following that meeting, I wrote to the Chief Executive of Transport Infrastructure Ireland and asked to meet with him as a result to discuss this hugely important issue. He responded to me yesterday evening and he didn't respond to my request to meet with him. And I'm concerned about that. I think it's unacceptable that he would not meet with the chairman of the committee to discuss further and other issues that arise. So I would propose, with the consent of the committee, that we write to Transport Infrastructure Ireland seeking the transparency and accountability as regarding their decision to cease the going to tender on this project, and that we seek their file and their documents in relation, I think it's the date, I can confirm to the clerk later, it's the 30th of September was the date I think they instructed Louth County Council not to proceed. So all of the documentation and reports, etc., that they have in relation to that decision, I think it's appropriate and proper that we get them, and when we get them we should consider them. And in the meantime, if I have your permission, I'll write formally again to the Chief Executive and seek a meeting with him. So if that's agreed by the committee, we'll go ahead with that. Okay, so that's not business dealt with. Now, minority sports in Ireland. I want to say that Pádraig Ó Céidigh has been very active in, obviously, in supporting that the committee identify, support and indeed laud and applaud successful people in minority sports in our country. And we're delighted at Pádraig's request that we have the following representatives, from Rowing Ireland, and in the order I've been given them here is Michelle Carpenter, Chief Executive Officer, Rowing Ireland; Eamon Cutlock, President of Rowing Ireland; Neville Maxwell, Olympian Chair of Rowing Ireland, HP Committee and Rowing Ireland Board Member; Sunita Puspure, if I've got that name correct, have I? I apologise if I haven't. Olympian, twice world gold medalist and 2019 European champion, Olympic boat class; and Phil Doyle, world silver medalist, Olympic boat class. So that is a fantastic achievement for all of you. And I also have present, also present as our guests are Emer Lamb, Afric Kyo, Claire Ferrick, Mary Maloney, Stephen King, Fran Keane, Dominic Casey, Ronan Byrne, Fintan McCarthy, Leo Gibson and Monica Duke Arska, I think if that's the correct pronunciation, and Tara O'Hanlon is in the public gallery as well. So you're really very welcome. We're delighted to have you. I think it's great to see so many people achieving so well in this sport. So Pádraig, if you don't mind, if you would just address the committee first.
Thank you very much. And to all of you, a deep, sincere thank you for coming here today to address our committee, the Oireachtas Committee on Transport, Tourism and Sport. To me, it's a very, very special occasion because I think it's the first time that Rowing Ireland have presented to a committee, an Oireachtas committee like this. It's also a special occasion because of what you do and how you inspire people who don't know you, you don't know, you'll never meet. And in some cases, you could be walking down a street 50 yards away from them and they see and hear what you're doing. We need inspiration in our country in a whole lot of different ways. I need inspiration, and people like you give us that inspiration. I'm particularly grateful to you, Chair, and to the Executive and to my colleagues here in totally supporting the request I made that you come in here and that you address the committee and address the people of Ireland, because this is going to be available on Oireachtas TV straight away. It's coming out live as far as I know. So that we all in Ireland become much more aware of what you do, the efforts you make. Eamon, Michelle, Neville, you as executive and the team around you and what you go to achieve. I'm not going to speak too long now, Chair, but it's not for me to speak. But just over 6 years ago, I got a heart attack, and I was quite ill. My heart stopped. I said, "What am I going to do?" And a great guy from Galway, Pádraig Ó asked me to go rowing. I said, "I'll never be able to do it." And I went rowing, and it was, to be honest with you, the finest thing that I've done in those 6 years. And the people I've met involved in the Tribesmen Rowing Club inspired me to keep going and to keep fighting and saying life is what you can do and not the obstacles that's before us. You do that for an awful lot of people, including me. So it's an incredible privilege that you're here and you're going to be in the AV room at 2 o'clock to address all TDs and senators in relation to what Rowing Ireland is about, what your challenges are, what you've achieved with little or no resources. I got to know rowing a little bit a good few years ago. I went to school in the Jazz in Galway and I used to teach there, so I had some awareness of rowing. But because I lived in Connemara, we had to get a bus in and out. I wouldn't have the time to go training. But I got to know some of your athletes, incredible people like Sam Lynch and others. And the effort that they've put in and the pride they have in let's call it the jersey, is as much a pride as any international athlete, any place. And we're very privileged to have that. My concern, and Chair, if I may, the single biggest thing I'd like out of this, the purpose of this, is actually for you to share some of your story and what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. But also I want government, I want the state to actually acknowledge that and give the financial support that you're entitled to and you deserve and you really, really need. You're punching so much above your weight without the resources. And I think it's incumbent on us to actually support you guys properly, at least that you can fight on a level playing field with the New Zealanders and the British and all of the other countries of this world who are getting resources way, way over and above. I know all of you, you're dependent on your parents and families and friends just to get by. And that's not good enough. So that's it. So I leave it over to you and to the speakers.
Okay, so I just have to read it. It's just it's a thing we have to say about privilege all the time. So I have to read it before anybody addresses the Dáil, but it doesn't apply to you, but I have to read it anyway. By virtue of Section 17(2)(1) of the Defamation Act, 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you give. However, if you're directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you're entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You're directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you're asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. And members are reminded of long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise and make charges against either a person outside the Houses or an official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. So that's out of the way. As I say, it doesn't apply here, but I have to read it. So anyway, look, that's it. So you have the floor, and I'm delighted now to invite Michelle Carpenter, Chief Executive Officer, Rowing Ireland, to make her opening statement.
Thank you, Pádraig. Today I'm joined by Eamon Coakley, President of Rowing Ireland, and Neville Maxwell, Chair of our High Performance Committee and Board Member, together with world silver medalist Phil Doyle and twice world gold medalist Anita Paspura. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to present on the challenges facing minority sport in Ireland. There's 1 week in every 4 years when the attention of the mass media covers minority sports. That is the first week of the Olympic Games. However, in recent Olympiads, the amateur ethos has been abandoned, and we've seen the introduction of professional soccer, basketball, tennis and rugby. This development has resulted in an incursion into the domain of minority sports, in that the Summer Olympiad has a ceiling of 10,500 athletes, and the introduction of the above sports has resulted in a reduced allocation of athlete participation in traditional Olympic sports. There are many challenges facing minority sports in Ireland, and these are exacerbated by the overwhelming media coverage of major sports such as Gaelic games and professional sports such as soccer and rugby. When opening an Irish newspaper, you will observe that these sports enjoy 90% of sports coverage. These sports are mainly mass participation sports, in that those that can fill a stadium. However, their coverage is not regularly on our sporting success for us as a nation. And with that, I quote former Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott: "The nation unites when we succeed at the international stage. All sport is a powerful force in creating social harmony." The minority sports, however successful they are conducted in a virtual media vacuum, and therefore struggle to attract significant commercial sponsorship. They rely on remittances from participants, the excellent Sports Capital Grant System and Sport Ireland funding. However, what pride and achievement they bring to a country when we do bring home those medals. This not only affects the country's mood, but the economy as a whole. To those of us in minority sports, it's a source of amazement at the vast amount of state funding that goes into the major sports, which enjoy, by our perception, vast financing of gate receipts, TV coverage and commercial sponsorship. Most of these significant sports have the luxury of being held behind high walls, which enables them to command significant income from those gate receipts. In the Rio Olympiad 2016, Ireland won its first ever Olympic medal. In a post-race interview after the semi-final, our two athletes decided to have a bit of crack with the interviewer. This interview was so refreshingly different from the media-trained, cliche-ridden conversations, and it went viral. With that, the O'Donovan brothers became an internet sensation. In Rowing Ireland, we assumed that we would be able to capitalise on this publicity to attract significant commercial sponsorship. However, despite contacting dozens of Irish firms and corporations, the media circus had quickly moved back to major sports, and it became evident that if your sport is in a virtual media blackout for all but 1 week of the Olympiad, commercial sponsors are therefore not interested. I have been fortunate myself to be involved in rowing since the age of 13. Rowing has followed me from Limerick City and its 6 rowing clubs to Dublin and the banks of the Liffey. throughout my career in Strasbourg and Frankfurt and back to Ireland. I've seen the benefits, as my colleagues here today have, of the sport of rowing. Dedication, hard work, perseverance, the ability to work alone and in a team. It sounds like a job specification, but it's what we learn in our sport. One of the first achievements when I took over the role of CEO was to launch our strategic plan last year and its 4 main pillars. Our first pillar is Rowing for All, a Sport for Life. And in 2019, Rowing Ireland increased its membership by 25%. This total, however, does not include anyone who doesn't race and just rows for pleasure or recreationally. These are licensed competitive members, and we believe that there are thousands more members of Rowing Ireland. Rowing Ireland also has 30,000 individual students as part of the Get Going, Get Rowing programme, a schools programme which allows students to row with a pathway to clubs and on the water rowing. In 2019, we had numerous students from the Get Going, Get Rowing programme who went on to clubs and represent Ireland at junior international level. Being in line with the National Physical Activity Plan is key for us at Rowing Ireland, working with all ages and abilities, from women in sport to men on the move, children, young people with autism, Down syndrome and other skills. We see no barriers in our sport. Although we may be considered a minority sport with only racing licence memberships captured, we punch well above our weight and work hand in hand with our local sports partnerships, as is recommended with the National Physical Activity Plan. Our second pillar is leading our sport. With a small staff base and limited resources, we strive to do this. We are one of the few national governing bodies who's achieved the Governance Code of Ireland, and despite constraints, we will continue to strive to be an innovative NGB using effective and efficient internal structures and systems. Our third pillar is supporting clubs across the country. Rowing clubs are the hub of our sport. Many are located in areas of socio and economic need, and they cater for all. Most of our clubs are struggling with volunteers and the ability to provide for new members. However, last year, our Irish Championships, which took place at the National Rowing Centre in Cork, had the highest number of participants ever, with thousands racing over 3 days. Our regattas are seeing record numbers, and clubs have highest membership ever. We have clubs that cater from the ages of 8 to 88 across the 32 counties of Ireland, from Cork to Antrim, Galway to Dublin. Last but not least is the pillar of our sport that we are so proud of. It's high performance, and our objective is to excel. Post-Rio, we had 5 athletes, 2 of whom retired. In August 2017, when our high performance director joined our team, we had 11 lightweight rowers in our programme, a category that Ireland has always been steadfast in. However, we were aware that the lightweight programme may be slashed from the Olympics, and we needed to up our game. Now, 2 years later, we have 9 lightweight men and women and 10 openweight men and women. 3 of those openweight boats have already qualified for the Olympics. We are now in a different place. We are ranked 2nd in the world in Olympic boat classes, ahead of our rivals in Germany and Great Britain and such great rowing nations as the US and Australia. We have qualified more boats than Irish rowing have ever done. 4 boats will go to Tokyo to represent us. With 3 World Championship medals in Olympic class boats, we are poised and ready for it in less than 37 weeks' time. We won't stop there, as we're also confident we can qualify a 5th boat at next year's regatta in Lucerne. Additionally, we have an amazing athlete, Katie O'Brien, who took home a bronze medal in this year's PR2 event. Katie was trained by a volunteer coach all year. If we were to look at research around world rowing, you would see it's a well-known fact in coaching that it takes €1 million per year per boat to win an Olympic medal, and it also takes one-to-one coaching of crews. We have qualified on a fraction of that. Pathways are crucial, and in 2019 we had 2 medals at the Under-23 World Rowing Championships, a silver and a bronze, also coached by volunteer coaches. 4th in the Junior World Championships by our Junior Men's 4, and a silver medal by that same crew at the European Championships. Our future is bright. We are ready for Tokyo and the benefit it will bring to us as a country. Sports provide a platform for people to come together and support their country. International events like the Olympics serve as a point around which to rally and show national pride and unity, and we are ready to drive this. Despite efforts, we still don't have a big sponsor or philanthropist to support us. As I said, most minority sports suffer from the same ailment. And despite our success, it seems few want to invest in our journey to Tokyo, our dream and reality of Olympic medals. We do rely on Sport Ireland for their funding, and we are very grateful to them for their support. As an organisation and a country, we have to give our athletes who dedicate their lives to training more than 15 times a week, and that dream and reality of medals. Moreover, it's also important to support the pathway so that we can continue until Paris and LA. Finally, I leave you with the words of our High Performance Director in his recent summary of our position. With 3 Olympic-class medals, Ireland is ranked 2nd in the world in Olympic boat categories, surpassing all objectives and expectations and Ireland records. With 3 medals and 4 crews selected for the Olympics, we are no longer the underdogs. We are now what countries will look at and think of. And this means that we now have to set a bar, and that more than ever, as an Irish team, we must be more dedicated, committed and focused. We must strive to look for ways to improve and keep our foot firmly on that accelerator, because all our opponents will put pictures of our athletes on their mirrors, because those rowers, are the ones to beat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very authoritative and deep analysis of the work that you're doing, the needs of your organisation, and the huge success you've had, which is recognised, as you say, internationally. You know, if there's anything we can do as a committee, as through Pádraig there and Chin, to help you, and hopefully out of this meeting today, maybe some potential sponsors and some potential people out there might like to get involved anyway. And can I just say that, look, it's fantastic to achieve at the highest level, and even to participate is also equally important. I was in Kew Gardens there about 2 Saturdays ago, and on the river there was hundreds of people rowing, like their town, their village, their club. It took about 2 hours to go by. So there is huge interest and participation, and I welcome the increased participation you're talking about. And just before I bring in, if anybody else would like to speak, you're more than welcome, or any of the members. I just want to pay tribute to, in my youth, I was rowing as well, believe it or not. And Jerry Daly, probably don't know him, but he might be listening out there. He was a local solicitor at the time, but he got us all involved, and we had a great time, as well as a great club. So we had, there's a social side to it as well, and there's participation, and there's friendships, and there's, the most important thing about rowing is you're all together, it's teamwork, and it's organisation. So certainly, can I just ask, no problem, can I just ask, I'll take, obviously, Shandor Mahoney initially, but would anybody else like to say anything? Anybody else like to speak? Anybody at all? You're more than welcome to just chip in any views you might have. At any time. You don't have to do it now, but we want to hear you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's a privilege for me to be here today. First of all, to address the committee, but also to be in the presence of the great athletes that we have. These are the prime athletes in Irish sport. Sunita here beside me is the golden woman of Irish sport. Two gold medals here, and world gold medals and a silver gold medal. It's an amazing privilege, and it's something I started rowing in the 1960s, and it was beyond our wildest dreams, and it wasn't until the the 1970s, the Sean Dre dragged us almost single-handedly into the sport, closely followed by the Garda 4, a great Garda crew. And then we decided, rather than have individuals or clubs doing it, to open up a national squad so that talented athletes from all the clubs throughout the 32 counties could have an opportunity to be brought together, to be nurtured and developed, not only to compete with the best, but to beat the best. And we've been phenomenally successful. It's been a revelation to me with how well our athletes have done. I was at a FISA Congress after the World Championships this year, and several people came down to me. The president of FISA came down, the great Sir Steve Redgrave, the five-time Olympians, came over to me, and a kind of humble Irishman sitting down with my votes just at the Congress. And but the number of people that come up to say, "What are you doing in Ireland? How are you doing it?" It's just amazing, because they know the shoestring that we work on. So it's and of course it's down to the hard work. We have. I think in our high-performance director, Antonio Murray-Giovanni, I think we've got the Alex Ferguson of rowing. I really do, and I hope we can keep him because he's been so phenomenally successful. But the athletes here, you have no concept of how hard they train. And why are they beating everybody else in the world? Because they train harder than everybody. There's no inspiration. It's not the air down in Cork that they breathe, although Cork does have a reputation of producing fabulous athletes, but they train harder than everybody else. They are truly amazing people. The demands that are placed on them are phenomenal, and I just would like to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Okay, so I take John O'Mahony, and then feel free if anybody wants to comment as well.
Okay, thank you, Cathaoirleach, and just to thank you for the presentation and the articulation of the obstacles that you and the difficulties that you face as a minority sport, and compliment Senator O'Céidigh for inviting you in here to the committee, because it is an opportunity to highlight your needs, if you like, and congratulations as well on overcoming all of those obstacles to bring so much success and so much glory to the country. And as you say, when the arrival back at airports and there's everyone greeting and whatever, but it's in the dark days and the difficult training that goes on behind the scenes that nobody sees that needs to be supported. I suppose in that context, if I may ask one question, but is, what funding do you get at present? First of all, obviously the sports capital grants for facilities would, at some stage, what funding do you get as a governing body? Because when we have the Olympic Federation in here, or the Sport Ireland, I mean, always there's targets being set for the medals that can be won at Olympics. And the suggestion I know that some of us made a number of years ago was, like, obviously I think Britain's targeted cycling at some stage, and here we have you have broken through the glass ceiling in your performances and your medals, and surely there's a case to be made, and maybe a recommendation from this committee, and I would support it, to look at rowing as an opportunity to win more medals. And we all look, when we see those few weeks of the Olympics every time, we all look at where the medal table is, and poor old Ireland is, has done well, for instance, in boxing and so on, but I think there's an open opportunity here. And obviously what there needs to be in that case then is a discrimination because, as you said, you find it difficult to attract the big sponsors. I'd be very much a member of the GA over the years, and I do know the earning and the great work that they do and so on. But there is need for us as a country to target what we can be successful at. And you are demonstrating and have demonstrated what we are, in the last number of years. And it has all bounced up on our radar. But I suppose what we need to do now is grasp the opportunity to, in whatever way we can, to support you in continuing the great work that you're doing. because you mentioned there about is the Australian Prime Minister about sport inspiring. I happened to be speaking to a summer school during the summer, and my theme was you know, how sport can unite and inspire in a way that politics cannot, or as we know now very much at the present, are other things as well. And in preparation for that, I switched on the 9 o'clock news the night before just to look at all of the stories that were in the news, apart from the sport, were bad news stories. There was a mass murder in the United States. There was a dissident attack in Northern Ireland. There was a whole lot of other bad news. Brexit was bringing bad news that time as well. And suddenly they went over to the sport. And I think it actually included, I forget, you have had so many successes over the summer months, but one of them was rowing. And there was other success in golf, I think, at the time as well. So the only good news, and that news was through the sport, and the only inspiration that came was through that. So I would certainly think that there's an opportunity here, and as you say, you don't maybe get the media coverage now. I think that hopefully that is changing in certain, with the 2020 thing in female sports and all of that, and there probably needs to be opportunities to increase the media coverage for the minority sports. Obviously the majority sports will always get it, but it's about getting extra for the minority sports. So I just want to compliment you and say that as a committee, whatever recommendations and whenever the Olympic Council is in, or Sport Ireland, that I certainly would be pushing that minority sports that have proved themselves with the medals should be getting, you know, a discrimination in extra funding. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy O'Keefe. And he's from Cork, by the way, in case you don't know.
You stole my thunder.
The question maybe for later is, you know, what exactly funding do you get?
Of course, yeah. Go ahead.
So our high performance budget is 600,000 a year. If you compare it to New Zealand, the same size country, they get 3 million in euros equivalent. But out of that 600,000, we run the National Rowing Centre as well. We get some core money as well, where we would run programmes like the Get Going, Get Rowing programme and support clubs. But it costs us 100,000 a year out of that pot of money, if you call it, to fund the National Rowing Centre and the running of it. And the athletes will be testament here and will tell you it can be a cold place in winter time, with trying to save the pennies down there, I suppose a lot of our budget as well would go on camps, and camps are very important. We are an island on the west coast of Europe, on the side of the Atlantic, and mileage is key with rowing. So it's important that we get to sunnier climates, like the cycling kind of do in Majorca as well, so that we can get those miles in, and they are key, and those camps can take a sixth of the budget in a blink.
Fair enough, Deputy. Oh, sorry.
I think there is a strong case, and I know there is a commitment in the programme for government to double the commitment to sport over the next number of years. So hopefully that some of that can be ring-fenced for what
Deputy O'Keefe, Vice Chair, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, I suppose we could spend all day here giving the plaudits to the success of the rowing Ireland. First of all, Chair, I acknowledge Michelle Capito's comment in her opening deliberation, and that is, you do punch above your weight. In fairness, we've acknowledged that, and even punch above your weight and get into this committee. I think there's only last March 2018, your former CEO, Hamish Adams, was here as well, deliberating on behalf of the minority sports. And look, I suppose as a young fellow, and you mentioned the other ago about national TV broadcast coverage, for example, the Olympics, outside the field and track events, we used to all be watching swimming, gymnastics, and rowing, and maybe one or two little sports in the Olympics of years gone by, and you said it has grown immensely since. Just to clarify that one issue you made in regards to participation in the upcoming Olympics, are you limited by numbers of boats or time qualification? You know, if every one of your athletes qualified Olympic time, how are you limited on participation? You mentioned because of the increased number of athletes going to the Olympics, because of all the expanded sports, that you're forced to reduce in participation, even though at the same time you get more successful in qualification times. You might just elaborate that for me, Michelle. Look, I understand McCockman, the most renowned rowing club near me, isn't from my County Cork, and we won't go to the issue of the water difficulties they have because of the weir problem, but they do a tremendous show. Great volunteers there, which you acknowledged, unpaid, provide good athletes, and we see famous names down through the years, Garrod Towick, Pat Rice from the under year, and I know, like, you know, that a lot of work goes into it. Capital investment, it's okay for the athlete, the rower has to pay for a boat in that, and when, you know, submissions have been made, and it's been made by other representatives on your behalf, is hopefully to get a VAT reduction on equipment, which would be a big plus by the government. The other issue, like, is funding, and I know you're concerned that, you know, that sponsorship seems to go to the bigger sports events. And there was a suggestion that, you know, maybe philanthropists would begin some exemption to give you money, like, you know, and that has been advocated by one of your overall organisation, the Federation of Irish Sport, in other deliberations. I would ask you one question, Ms. Capito, is the government launched a sports policy document just over 12 months ago in regards to your participation, and everyone signed up to it. Are you happy it's going the right way on your behalf, or could it go faster, or should more be done within that policy document to enable your sport to progress more? And I acknowledge also that you also you make a big point there about that you're compliant in regards to not ill-famous, but in regards regulatory, and that's obviously causing an hour's expense as well, like, you know, and has that been taken into account when funding has been allocated by Sport Ireland and that, like, you know? So with that, I wish you every success. Glad to see someone here and aspiring roles in the years ahead. Maybe they've got medals already in their jubilee classes, but we wish you all the best and glad to see you all here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Senator Daly.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for.
Back from America.
Yes, yeah, they're all asking for you, Chair. They're all asking for you. Donald Trump wants you to come over. He has a small bit of bother at the moment. He said, "There's only one man can save me, and that's the Chair of the Transport Committee." Before he's sent on a further journey. I just want to pay tribute to the athletes, and I know that they're not in it to participate, they're in it to win, and made all the harder by the lack of funding. And we saw what happened when hockey had its tremendous success in terms of achieving the silver medal in the Olympics. And again, similar story, you know, and underfunded. And then, of course, you know, there was the promise of funding, but again, it didn't. It was $1 million, but it was not quite as it had been initially portrayed. And you outline the issue of the fraction that you're doing it compared to the New Zealand, and like it's quite a stark figure when it's like 1 million per boat, you know, and requirement for one-to-one coaching. Luckily enough, obviously, we're in pre-budget season, so you're in the right time to be asking for money. And on the 16th of October, we have Sports Ireland in. So what we would ask of you in this committee is what can we ask of them on your behalf that you want change, that's available, that can be done. And I agree with my colleagues in terms of those who are excelling should get a bonus because of the hard work that they have done over the years. But what I would also like to hear from the rowers themselves, because thanks for coming along, but we didn't ask you to be here just for the photo op. We actually want to hear your points of views, because you're the ones that have to get up in the dark mornings in the winter and in the cold. And you know, we can imagine how difficult it is, but we'd like to hear from you as to what you would like to see changed in the system that would assist you to achieve your full potential. Thank you, Chair.
Well said, Senator. Would anybody like to say something there?
Yeah, could I quickly
sure,
answer
of course,
Mr. Daly's question there? One of the things I think we could really change for the athletes is we, as well as the Rowing Ireland receiving funding from the government, we receive separate funding on our performances throughout the year from Sport Ireland. This funding runs from January to January. So it starts on the 1st of January when you become a carded athlete, and then you receive your first payment on the 1st of April, and you get 3 monthly payments as it goes, and starts at 12, 20 and 40 depending on your performance. Now, for example, there are certain people who have won the World Championships there in September and are now expected to not be in university and be funded by parents, family, friends. Commercial sponsorship is very difficult to get. I was this athlete last September, and there are athletes now in the same position now. There's no review of funding and no review of performance between January to January. So they're expected now, these individuals, to fully fund themselves in Cork during an accommodation crisis, where I'm from Belfast, by the way, and I'm Northern Athlete, and the rent prices are extortionate. Getting rental accommodation is very difficult. Putting down deposits, then paying your first month rent, plus all the additional costs. And you're expected to do that without receiving a penny until April. So 7 months of fully supporting yourself, fully funding yourself while rowing full time. Feeding a rower is quite difficult as well. It costs quite a lot of money. My mum's complaining non-stop about it for the last month because I've moved home after the World Champs. It's something that possibly could be looked into with regards to the system, is reassessing funding requirements and actually making changes to it throughout the year. I know, for example, because I'm from the north, I get access to GB and Irish, and I've made my decision, very, very happy with it. But I do have quite a lot of contacts over there, and they get funding reassessments 3-4 times a year, and athletes, as they move in and out of the squad and in and out of the system and perform and don't perform, have their funding adjusted according to their needs. I think that's something that would be massively, massively helpful, especially getting people onto the programme. For example, last year I have qualified as a doctor, so I had to go back to work for 4 months over Christmas because I couldn't afford to row full time. Coming out as a student with no money, no savings, no job. And my parents couldn't afford to keep me down in Cork full time, so I had to take time out of the boat, which meant that my doubles partner Ronan was on his own down in Cork, and I was training on my own up in Belfast, working a full-time job in a hospital to try and get through, because there was no ability to reassess requirements or funding needs through that time. And then eventually, when I knew the money would be coming in the 1st of April, I had a bit of savings and was able to make the transition down to Cork. But I don't know how people are doing that without having a job to go to in the middle of Christmas. It must be very, very difficult.
Important points, yeah. Anybody else like to say something there?
If I can just answer the questions, maybe in the meantime.
Of course, yeah. And just before you do, is there any other, like from the participants themselves, with any of the? Yeah, don't be shy. We want to hear your voice. I used to be a teacher. We used to
and you brought up the point of food consumption, like, you know, and because of how many calories you have to take in a day, like the cost of that alone, like, is enormous. And you know, there are some sports require larger calorie intakes than others, like, and there's no account by Sports Ireland in that, I presume. Like, literally, it's a one-size-fits-all operation in terms of the grant. Well, I mean, like, and sorry, Chair, just to intervene again, like we will be, they're in front of us here, but also the budget is ongoing, and I know everyone's in agreement with the proposals in terms of because you're excelling, you should get more. There should be a bonus payment. So, like, I think we would like, maybe if you write back to us and after this meeting and say, look, this is what our ask is, and especially in the light of the fact that, you know, there's such a gap between, you know, over half a year between, you know, when you become eligible for funding or increased funding, and then, you know, waiting for the cheque to come in the post. You know, that's when a performance will dip, because if you have to go back to work, you know, your performance actually would decrease as a result of not being able to do it full time.
You have to pay a levy for accommodation or for competitions and camps. So these vital camps, we as athletes pay 23% of the overall cost of the camp out of our funding that we receive. So if you're not receiving that funding, then you're charged €600 to go to Italy for 3 weeks and kill yourself in a boat. It's quite difficult to come to terms with that, as well as for the World Championships. Recently, the camp beforehand and the World Championships, we received a bill for going to that competition. So it's pay for play for your medal, which is something that could be really looked at and changed if there was additional funding to cover the athlete's share of going to the competition, because I know some other athletes in other sports and they have never heard of this levy idea.
Yeah, I mean, and just they're the idea, they're the things, they're the problems we want to hear. Like, it's not the, you know, the overall, like the day-to-day, you know, nuts and bolts problems that you're facing, trying to, you know, win medals. That's what we want to hear. And what we want to then do is try and find solutions to the problems that you're having.
And who puts the levy on? Who do you pay the levy to?
Pay the levy back to Rowan Ireland.
Right.
But we can't blame them in a way because they only have
it's not a blame. No, we're just trying to
that
understand
amount of money they have, and we have to help our governing body to send us to the camp. So that's the situation we're in.
What we want to do is to make sure you end up with more money, everybody, rather than less. So I understand. I was trying to understand the process.
Let's say we have, for example, Fintan. He's a world champion now. He will receive no funding until April, and then he only has funding for a few months before he goes to Olympics. That is no help for him as well, because he's under more stress up until April and has to pay all the camps and everything.
This is just simply a bureaucratic decision by Sports Ireland. This is how they do it.
It's always been like that. I remember I flagged this up after London Olympics. We did like massive questionnaires about this, and I said like receiving first funding in April is not helpful if you're going to Olympics in July. So.
To be clear on this, because they are here before us in the 16th. So literally, it doesn't care if it's an Olympic year or it's not an Olympic year. They don't see one year as any different to the next. That does not make a lot of sense.
Well, the athletes who would have won medals last year, the Olympic class athletes and the world class athletes, get 2-year funding. But if there's a change in a crew, for instance, you know, the women's 4 and Fintan came in on the scene this year. They were developmental athletes, a lot of them, or some of them were. So they wouldn't have been on the carding criteria, or they would have been on very little carding criteria. So they now have to wait until next April to receive it, which adds the stress and the strain, you know, when you should be focusing on your boat and you know, being that person on the mirror, you're focusing on how you're going to pay your rent at the end of the day.
No, they're hugely important points. Now we have to leave the room by 1:15. Sure. Sorry, no, I just want to say that so that people know.
I knew enough to fact.
Kevin, there's no point bringing in. I just want people to know that. Of course, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
What I would just like
to reiterate the points that Sunita made, in that the athletes all make quite a strong contribution to the events that I actually go to, and there are very few sports globally where you actually pay to represent your country and you come home with a medal and that's it. So I think this is something that should be looked at. We have to do it this way because it's the way the funding is split and divided out. We have a programme in place and we have a dream and we have a strategy to actually have far more crews at the Olympic Games and the World Championships, and actually to win way more medals than what we're talking about here today. All we need is the funding. The athletes are there in clubs around the country, and they're all looking at these people that are here today, and they've seen them on telly, and they want to actually achieve and emulate what they've done as well. We're showing them how to do it, but we need more people to coach them, more people to look after them, and then we also need to have a system in place where they can come down to Cork and train, or they can train in their different centres around the country. So we have a very, very good blueprint that we're not showing to any other country. It's our secret, but we have a great attitude amongst our athletes, our volunteers and our coaches. So we're like a business. We're like a start-up business at the moment. We need the funding to really grow this out. And 2024, 2028, our target is way beyond what we've done this year so far.
Can I ask you, have you raised this as an organisation with Sport Ireland directly in debate or discussion? Or?
Sport Ireland have been very, very supportive of us. All the meetings we've gone to, they've really done their best to help us. But ultimately, it comes down to the level of funding that Sport Ireland have to distribute amongst all the sports that they look after.
I mean, the point you're making, sir. Sorry, of course, John, just one point. Just the exceptional, so I won't pause a second, it's the exceptional nature, it's where it's the additional costs that you have that are exceptional is the issue. Sorry, John, you get in there,
Yeah, no, just in relation to the point that Phil made about the funding not being paid out until April, is it within Sport Ireland's remit to change that, or is it to have more flexibility in reacting
This is something that we raise with Sport Ireland, and they're as accommodating as they possibly can be, but ultimately it comes down to how you operate budgets.
Yeah, because just in the context of some other organisations that have been in here, the FAI, for instance, used to make a request for funding to be front loaded, and I just would find it amazing if that was happening with one, that it should be happening particularly with minority sports, because it's needed more by the minority sports.
That point is very well made, actually, because that was the key point.
Certainly Sport Ireland are open to that, and we will work with them to try and do that, to look after certain athletes that have fallen into that or jumped into that category, should I say. But ultimately it comes back to the number that Michelle mentioned earlier on of 690,000 to win 4 World Championship medals, 3 at Olympic category this year alone. We are way underfunded as a sport relative to our peers in other countries. Imagine what we could do if we had double or treble that amount of money.
Sorry, Senator Daly, do you want to finish then, Pádraig, after? Just take Mark and then
No,
you.
thank you, Chair.
Sorry, yeah. No, okay.
It's not. It's about you guys, and it's about the questions that my colleagues here have for you. So I don't want to
that's
take up any
fine.
more.
Sorry, Mark.
And as I said, we have them coming in. So, but like one of the solutions would be, you would imagine in an Olympic year, why would you be paying somebody in October when they're kind of like, you know, they need it in the run up to the Olympics? So like we would be asking them, and this depends on how we can interact with them and find out why they're not making the sensible decision of whether, when you're an Olympic athlete and you qualify, which is what you should be doing, you should be peaking in the run-up to the Olympics, that they don't front-load the money in Olympic years for people who qualify for the Olympics and, you know, appear out of nowhere. I know nobody appears out of nowhere when it comes to qualifying for the Olympics. So what we're about is solutions. So any solutions you have, first of all, identify the problems, but like we'd like to then propose those to Sports Ireland and say, look, if you have to ask the Minister for Sport to bring forward your budget, like it's still going to be spent, the money is still going to be allocated, but there's no point in giving you money in October and December when, you know, the Olympics is now another 3.5 years away. So like those kind of practical, so that's why we want you in here today to raise those issues, the practical day-to-day problems about rent and accommodation and not getting money for 7 months when you're a qualifier, and then you're still waiting for the cheque to come in the post. So any other solutions that you come up with between here and the 16th of October, please, you know, bring them to us and we'll be able to raise them with not only Sports Ireland but also the Minister.
Okay, so we leave it at that then. I'd like to thank our witnesses and our guests. It's been very impressive, tremendously successful, very informative. You've given us issues that we should raise now with Sport Ireland, and we will come back to you on that. So the Joint Committee is now adjourned until 10:30 a.m. on the 2nd of October. Thank you very much indeed.